Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live, coming at you 5 days a week, 11 a.m. Eastern. We're off Wednesday and Thursday, so this is my Friday. But hey, we'll have shows throughout the weekend. Start, sit questions. So we're back to doing the usual, the Sunday stream, 11 a.m. Eastern. So if you're with me for that, that's great. But look, there's like a million questions. I know it's hyperbole, but so we're gonna work out this week some way. I'm still working with my RotoWire teammates where I'll be able to answer some questions, probably on the RotoWire X account, and that would probably be Saturday late morning, right before my XM show starts at 1. So we'll definitely be looking for that. I'll have further announcements on that Friday. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Always in this show, we'll have Brandon Kravitz on at the bottom of the hour. We'll be going over some waiver wire pickups. And this show, as always, Tuesdays, I'll go through the Monday night game, fantasy takeaways, and then we'll go through some players who are trending up. Again, thank you for hanging with me. It means so much that you allow me to be part of your fantasy football experience. I don't take that lightly. Man, if the AFC were to finish now, and Albert, good morning. And I know teams are on buys, and there are teams that, 9 games, some teams play 10 games. The Bills would be the number 10 seed, which only 7 make the playoffs. Houston Texans would be in the playoffs. Cleveland Browns, Pittsburgh Steelers. Did we have them in? Probably not. Wow. Cincinnati, they're tiebreakers. Cincinnati's tied with Houston. But right now, that head-to-head, that'd be a big one, right? So Cincinnati'd be out. Buffalo would be out. Chargers would be out. And the Jets would be out. So there's that. Now a lot could change. There's a lot of football left. But, man, what a season. Anyway, the Broncos. Broncos come out with a win. Oh, my gosh. The Bills. They just wanted to give that game away. Hey, credit to the Broncos. They win. But, man, the last field goal, sails wide. Uncle Ted, good morning. Great to see you here. So that last field goal, sails wide. Guess what? Buffalo has 12 men on the field. So they get the re-kick. Buffalo loses. Wow. Both teams, flub ups. We had missed extra points. We had just bonehead errors. That's more on the Josh Allen side. And let's start with the Broncos, though. So what is Russell Wilson at this point? For fantasy, he's getting you a lot of games with a couple touchdowns. The yardage usually isn't much. The offense is very managed. We talked about this preseason. I said that, look, the offseason moves that Sean Payton made, he bolstered the run blocking on the line. McGlinchey picks up McGlinchey, Ben Powers. They were going to run the ball. They brought in some extra tight ends. Now, Dulcich has been hurt all year, but they were going to run the ball, and they were going to manage Russell Wilson in the passing game. There was no way Sean Payton was going to put the team on Russell Wilson's back at this stage of his career. So Wilson throws for $192, but he gets 2 touchdowns. So if you're using him in 2 quarterback leagues, no reason not to stop using them. Those are very serviceable numbers for a second quarterback, right? It's Javonte Williams. The workload. Now, the snaps weren't great, 52%, and I want to say he was similar to that in the last game. He had a game with 81% at one point. But, again, 21 carries, 4 targets, completely dominating touches. So when he's on the field, he's getting the ball, which is good. You give him a little rest in the silence because he's getting an enormous workload. Doesn't quite go for 4 yards per carry in this one. And Buffalo since losing Daquan Jones, Buffalo hasn't been a great run defense. But he catches a touchdown pass, so he ends up 110 total yards and a touchdown. Javonte Williams right now with that workload, look, there's been an easy bar to get to a low-end running back 1 this year. He's probably at that bar. If you're seeing targets, you're getting volume, you're getting red zone work, that puts you there. Puts you ahead of Tony Pollard, that's for sure. You're right. Hate to throw shade, but it is what it is, right? Honestly, he's right there probably with Bijan Robinson. With that workload, and, Bijan had a nice game last week, but again, it's been nothing earth-shattering. So, yeah, Javonte's right there. Interested to see, though, remember Jaleel McLaughlin? He was a thing about a month ago. Last 3 games, 15% or less playtime. He had 6 carries, 8 yards, 2 catches, 4 yards. So, he's going to get a few touches each week. He has very explosive speed, so he could break a big play here and there. But this is the downside. The downside is 2 catches, 12 yards, 3 PPR points. And but Samaje Perine, 33%, had 1 more target, was more productive in PPR, 3 for 34, through the air. So there's that. Now the receiving game, Jerry Jeudy's been playing about the same snap share most of the season. He's right around the 65% range. He's not a full-time player. I really don't get that. I don't really know what the disconnect is. We've seen him when he's healthy. He's a good route runner, but we did worry about Russell Wilson and receivers that like to make their living in the middle of the field. The sight line it can be an issue. It's been for his career. Remember Russell Wilson when he was throwing Tyler Lockett in the slot back in Seattle. Those were a lot of downfield. Those are different throws. They're not in the congested area. So Jerry Jeudy just 3 for 35, really not getting it done. He's maybe a flex at this point. Cortland Sutton got 11 targets, a fumble, but other than that, he cashes 53 yards, not great yardage, but PPR 8 catches and a touchdown. Take it all day long. Cortland Sutton has been scoring touchdowns. The yardage isn't always there. So it really puts him on the wide receiver 3 map, but there is downside. Because if he doesn't score a touchdown, like this week, he had all these targets, but there's not a lot of weeks he's getting that many targets. So there's that. But pretty much that's it with them. There's other than Javonte Williams right now, there's nobody who's like a slam dunk starter, but we kind of knew that. Bill's side of the ball. Wow. Just wow. Look, we talked about this in the preview yesterday. Denver's defense, we didn't know what they were. They were the defense that gave up 70 against Miami, but then they looked good 2 games against Kansas City. And it was one thing, they had people who were hurt and figuring some things out. And we said they were probably closer to the better version than they were that horrible unit. And they played well enough, but realistically, Josh Allen, again, couple picks. James Cook fumbles the ball away early. Really gives momentum early to the Broncos. And that's exactly what they didn't need to do. And it probably played some part in how the game ended up. The Broncos are 4-5. I mean, if you think about it in terms like this clouded playoff picture, 4-5 and 5-4, that's like seed 7 through 14. Denver, like the Raiders, they're like actually in playoff contention. Weird. But anyway, back to them. Josh Allen, again, about 20 fantasy points here. And it was one of his lower games. He's had 3 games like this, but he had 117. I think that might be against the Jets in week 1. But other than that, he's always getting you that floor. So fantasy, set it and forget it. It doesn't matter what it looks like. He puts up the production. James Cook, weird game. Very weird game. We had that fumble early, and he got benched for about a quarter. Ends up with 12 carries. But where you can get to the Denver defense, I think what we can construct is this. If you have a good downhill running game, that gets going. Your tight ends have a good advantage. The middle of the field has a good advantage on them. And so it stands to reason that Cook gets 109 yards on his 12 carries, a couple catches for 11. The fumble costs you a little bit, but overall, fair enough. RB2 type game. And then, Dalton Kincaid. He had a big drop, but he goes 51 yards and touchdown, so you'll take that. Gabe Davis, 56 yards. He had 1 long catch. That was it. Nothing else. 2-point conversion, I believe. So there's that as well. Steph Diggs, I don't know. I mean, Patrick Surtain was on him quite a bit, but, Steph Diggs usually can beat anybody, but he ends up 3 for 34 on 5 targets. And you know what? His brother, Trev Diggs, he posts out like, got to get out of there. And Stephon Diggs hasn't been happy since last year. And I really worry that he's the kind of guy that could get toxic for his team. When he's not happy, everybody knows he's not happy. And there's 2 results to that. If you're winning, keep getting him the ball because winning cures all, right? But they're 5-5. They're not winning. They're not a very good football team right now. They're still a good football team. They're not a very good football team right now. And so that said, Steph Diggs, if you're in a league and you roster him, if you think you could get a haul from him, some people might be thinking squeaky wheel, and they think, okay, maybe they're going to feed him. He'll have a few big games the rest of the way for sure. He's Steph Diggs. But if it gets toxic there, if you could get a good return on him, it might be something to consider. And after this game, Big O, Doug, FC, I'll answer your question, and then after I finish this game up, I'm real close to that. But I think there's not much more to say here. Gabe Davis is boom or bust every week. Khalil Shakir, just 1 catch for 24 yards with 2 targets. Desperation flex. That's about what he is. James Cook is going to be that, low-end running back too. And you're hoping for the big play. You're hoping for a touchdown. But if he doesn't get those, there's not like a whole lot going on in terms of his weekly scoring. So there's that. All right. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you're on RotoWire YouTube. Remember, we're off Wednesday and Thursday. We'll be back Friday. We'll have gambling show Saturday, DFS, Sunday, start sip. All right. So Big O Dog FC. I'll answer this question. We got some time. Should I trade Tony Pollard for Waddle and Ingram? That depends if you have running back depth. If you have enough running backs where you've got 2 good starters and 1 reserve, you got to have 3 running backs. If you don't have 3 running backs, even if you're starting 2, injuries happen. It's just the nature of that position, right? And you don't want to be left holding the bag and not having a running back. But if you have 2 running backs you're happy with and a good enough one to sub in if you need, you're getting 2 starters. It sounds like you need a tight end. Ingram's coming off the bad game. That was the 49ers. 49ers did a nice job shutting him down. And then Waddle should have a good, following going forward. You have DeAndre Swift and David Montgomery. I think you need a 3rd running back. DeAndre Swift has a long injury history, and he's been getting a lot of carries. And so we're really tempting fate with him. Hopefully he stays healthy. And then Montgomery's already been hurt this year. And so we'll see with that. And then, so again, I really recommend you have 3 running backs. If you find one on the waiver wire, Breece Hall as well. Then make the trade. Yeah, definitely make the trade. Yeah, definitely make the trade. RV, what about Mims? I said this yesterday on the show. People said, man, they're going to say Mims. They're going to bring in more Mims. Dude, and that dude means everybody. In week 3, Sean Payton said, you're going to see more Marvin Mims. It never happened. And I said on the show yesterday, don't believe it until you see it. Right now, he's a kick returner. His snaps, I'll tell you exactly what they were. I copied this down here. 0% of the offensive snaps, special team snaps he had. You know what's weird? It had to be more than 0%. I get it from NFL GSIS, but he was listed as a target. So, but it was a very, very small percentage of plays, very small percentage. NFL GSIS missed that one up. Anyway, so yeah, he's not a factor. You can't trust him. You can't roster him. If there's a game where he gets 2 long passes and he catches one, fine. But he's gonna have a lot of zeros. So look, right now, whatever, here's the thing. Russell Wilson, he underthrows a lot of deep passes. And we know he hit Mims earlier in the year. We know that. But I think Sean Payton doesn't want to tempt Russell Wilson to throw deep. I think their formula is pretty established. I think that's really what he's scared of, right? Let's get a couple of these questions. I'll get some player trends in a minute. Admiral Nita, what priority waiver rank for Keaton Mitchell, Chandler, Khalil Herbert? John Harbaugh said Mitchell needs to get more work. Now, I don't know whose expense it is because I know Justice Hill blocks, and I don't think Mitchell's going to be a blocker. We could be wrong there, right? But I do think you got to put Mitchell number 1 there. I think so. Now, Ty Chandler looks like a 1-week rental because he came in for Madison with a concussion, 3 yards a carry. Nobody's impressed. He got the touchdown. But if you need somebody for this week, players have rarely been cleared the next week after a concussion this year. It's happened a couple times. It's rare. So Chandler would be a 1-week hit. Herbert has been the best running back per carry, broken tackle rates right there with Foreman, yards after contact. I think he's a little better than Foreman. And I think it's going to be, if the Bears have any mindset, it's going to be a Foreman and Herbert backfield. I posted a tweet of this yesterday on the X at Jim Coventry about the Bears backfield. I want to say Roschon Johnson is 2nd percentile yards after catch. Second percentile broken tackle rate. And it's a super low yards after contact. Whereas Foreman and Khalil Herbert are both playing very well. So, but I don't know what Herbert's only getting like 9 to 12 carries. So I think I'd put Mitchell ahead of Herbert because I think even with slightly less work, the explosiveness in the line, I put Herbert 2nd and then Chandler only if you need a 1-week starter. But if Mitchell's going to get more work, and that's what Harbaugh goes to, I'd probably still keep him ahead of that. All right, let me get through a couple of these quickly, and I got to get at this here. Disco David, Clay Keaton Mitchell over, I don't know what the rest, over Deontay Foreman. Because I don't trust the Bears organization to do anything right ever. And I don't know that they're going to be smart enough to make it a Herbert and Foreman backfield. They might hang on to this Roschon Johnson foolishness. So I play Keaton Mitchell. It's a Thursday game. We're not going to have any clarity on that Bears backfield. So I would just look, Foreman could have a big role and he could have a big game. I don't trust the Bears to use him right. If Keaton Mitchell is a must-add, so is Rico Dowdle. Well, Keaton Mitchell has shown in 2 games he could get you 70 yards, and he only needs about 5 touches to get it. I don't think Rico Dowdle's in that class yet. But I get it. John Brown, good morning. When I trade Pollard for White, assuming you need Rachaad White. So Rachaad White, he's living on the PPR, and it's probably not going away. Obviously, he got a lot of rushing attempts 2 weeks in a row. That's a hot streak because he's not a good runner. We know even the yards per carry are terrible. His line's bad, but he can't break any tackles. But he's catching passes, and that's huge. He's caught all of his targets the last 3 weeks. So you have Hall, you have Mostert, you have Mitchell. I would be inclined to do it. Because White has put up these numbers all season, and Pollard hasn't. And at this point, we got to just live with the reality, right? All right, let me just see here. All right, and I got to zip through these. So we got here. Mitchell's going to have a great 3rd week, just like A-Chan had. All right. Opinion about Olave. So Olave had a little slump, all right? But Olave's getting a ton of targets. So it's cyclical, and their offense isn't great. So his floor is so good. The ceiling games will be there. He's already had them. He had them earlier in the season. He was a little bit of a slump. I still think he's a borderline top 15 receiver right in there. So it's going to be ebbs and flows, but his floor is so dang good. I don't have any, worry about that. Admiral Nita, streaming tight end, Washington against the Giants against Washington, or the Chargers against Green Bay. Don't like the Chargers on the road. I probably go with the Giants here. Because Washington, they trade away their edge rushers now, and they can't cover, so there's not much there. All right, let's get some player trends. Got Brandon Kravitz coming in bottom of the hour. All right, quarterback riser, Sam Howell. Look, he's throwing the ball at an insanely high rate. 44, 45, 52 attempts. These attempts are through the roof. You're welcome, Admiral Lita. So attempts are through the roof. Yardage is through the roof. Putting touchdowns on the board, running for some yardage. Look, he's a top 10 quarterback rest of schedule. Eric Bieniemy is calling a great offense. That's it. So there we have it. You start him every week unless you've got an elite quarterback. If you have an elite quarterback, then obviously you frame it out. But Howell's getting it done every week. And I don't see a change in that offense. Going to be pass heavy. And crazy enough, the two of the touchdown passes, they went to running backs. Gibson and then Brian Robinson. So crazy. 2 running backs scored their touchdowns through there. Actually, in that game, Kenneth Walker scored his touchdown on a pass. That was weird. All 3 running backs score on touchdown receptions. But Howell, start him. Kyler Murray. Look, Kyler Murray, I love the mobility he showed. Coming off the ACL, he looked, the way he moved. I mean, he ran for 33 yards. That's fine in a touchdown. But the way he moved, and he had these little lateral moves, how he buys time, he looked like the same version he was. And now he's in a real offense as opposed to Cliff Kingsbury's nonsense. So right now, Kyler Murray, definitely in play to be considered in that top 15 quarterback. And if they start to mesh, because remember, he has some rust to knock off, right? But I still think there's a great opportunity for Murray to work his way into quarterback 1 status. If he runs for 33 and a touchdown, now threw for 249, only 32 attempts, didn't throw a touchdown, but I think that's coming. Marquise Brown and him didn't have that first game connection, but it was good to see the connection with Trey McBride because we know he'll be able to get the ball to Marquise Brown. Josh Dobbs is next. Look, Josh Dobbs has a lot of games this year with 40-plus rushing yards and touchdowns on the ground. Once you're talking that, we talk about mobile quarterbacks all the time. Those are the type of numbers that make you startable every week. Now, the passing numbers, 158 in his first game. Didn't know the playbook. Came in in the first quarter. 268 in this game. 3 touchdown passes in 2 games. A touchdown on the ground in each. He's probably getting Justin Jefferson back. And at that point, Joshua Dobbs, he only could go up from there. He's in a great situation. That offensive line, they're battling with Detroit to see which is the best in the league. They're both right there, run blocking, pass blocking. They are very good. They're excellent offensive lines. Joshua Dobbs went from the outhouse to the penthouse. He went from a terrible line to a great line. He went from good targets when Jefferson's back to he and Hockenson and Addison to great targets. And it's not like the Vikings have a running back they can count on. So he's going to have to throw the ball. And their defense has been playing well, but they're still going to have to score points. So Josh Dobbs, yeah, somebody to consider. Some running back risers. Jahmyr Gibbs. We talked about him yesterday on the takeaway show. Look, 58% of the snaps, 14 carries, 5 targets with David Montgomery back. I'm thinking to myself, we said this yesterday, you can't put the GD back in the bottle. If he's going to produce like this, you spent the 6th pick in the draft on him? You had a plan for him. Montgomery's great, but Gibbs has to have an equal role. Montgomery's still going to eat some grinder carries, and that nice 75-yard touchdown run he had was beautiful. But at this point, Gibbs has to be a factor. It makes their offense better to have both of them playing, equal snaps, as opposed to Gibbs just being the number 2. And it makes them less predictable on offense because if Gibbs is on the field, the defense aren't thinking passing down because he's contributing on the ground. It's a great 1-2 punch. And it really makes their offense, again, a lot better because we talk about it. If Gibbs is a change of pace, defense plays at the speed of the starter usually, and it's very hard to make that switch from snap to snap. Great situation for both. Gibbs, I moved him way up my rest of season rankings. I, obviously had him requisitely buried where he needed to be, but then he needed the breakout. We just assume Montgomery's coming back, and Gibbs is going to be back in the back row. Well, it wasn't the case. So we'll see. I don't think they were easing Montgomery back either. Montgomery had extra time to heal from rib cartilage injury. Najee Harris. Did you know he has like 15 PPR points in 3 of his last 4 games and double-digit PPR points in his last 4? I said 2 weeks ago, they're starting to run the ball from under center, and all of a sudden, wow, it works. Imagine that, running the ball from under center for a team that is, has running backs. And they're both good. Both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are both very good running backs. Najee, 16 for 82 this week, 16 for 69 the week prior, scored a touchdown in each, 4 targets in each. That's enough volume. And red zone work, he's back on the RB2 map. Again, if you're scoring 15 PPR points in 3 or 4 games, you're squarely on the RB2 map. And it's not a fluke. It's not a mirage. His broken tackle rate, near the top of the league. Yards after contact, not elite, but the next tier down. Najee Harris has been getting it done. It just had a bad situation earlier in the year. He's a good running back. Josh Jacobs. Well, at this point, if you're playing DFS, use him because Antonio Pierce, the head coach, interim coach, whatever we'll call him, he is definitely going to ride with Josh Jacobs. He made it very clear. That in 2 weeks, he proved it. 26 carries. Last week, 27 carries. They're going to ride Josh Jacobs. Now, Miami is a tough matchup this week. Miami is very good because Miami's a great defense. A lot of people look and say they're not. They're great against the run. It's not going to be an easy matchup for Jacobs. But if you're getting 26, 27 carries, if he gets going, they could slow that game down where Miami might not put up a ton of points. Now, Miami can score at a moment's notice, so that might be off. Devon Achane comes back. Well, it might be like what we see for the Chiefs. All right, well, give us 5 plays. We'll score a touchdown. So maybe that's not even a factor. They'll probably be able to whip up some points on the board. Tyreek Hill should be healthy coming out of the bye, too. So excited for Josh Jacobs. Things are looking up. And real quick, James Conner. I always got to talk about James Conner. Look, he purposely didn't score a touchdown in the game because they were trying to get a field goal to win the game. He could have easily had a touchdown at the end of the game. 16 for 73. Again, well over 4 yards per carry. The receptions will come. He hasn't seen many targets. Kyler's back. The targets will come. That offense is going to score points. Kyler's going to get them scoring points. And James Conner is going to get you touchdowns. James Conner was like a 6th, 7th round draft pick in most 12-team leagues. I told you when you drafted him, he's going to miss 4 games. Miss time. Just plan for him not being there. When he's on the field, start him. Do we like 7.3 PPR points? No. But it's not because he played bad. It's just because it was one of those games. He got the red zone work, but he purposely didn't score, and there weren't targets. So he has looked great all year. now the number should follow. Remember, this guy averaged over 20 PPR points from week 10 on last year. He is the real deal, and he looks just as good as he did last year. Wide receivers. Got to heap some praise on Noah Brown. Wow, he's been in the league a while. He was with Dallas for a while. 172 yards last week, 153 yards the week prior. It's going to end at some point because obviously we learned that from Puka Nacua, but no receiver. I mean, obviously that's a, close to a 3,000 yard seasonal pace, 25, 26. Well, clearly that's not happening. Nobody keeps that pace up, but we love what we saw. And so you got Nico Collins, who I don't know how long he's out. We'll see if he gets back. And then we've got Tank Dell. He's a fixture. The question is, how much does Robert Woods play? Now, as a receiver, we know at this point he's way past his prime, but as a blocker, he's amazing. So it's a matter of the coaching staff. It's a matter of Bobby Slowick and the staff want to do. Bobby Slowick runs the offense there. Do you want Brown in more? Do you put Woods in more? Do you split them? Now, Brown has all that yardage on just 8 and 6 targets. So it's not like it was like Puka Nacua getting 20 targets in week 1 and 15 targets in week 2. But that said, start Brown while he's hot, and then be ready if he cools off, or if we'll note the playing time. We always note the playing time every week in the snaps. And if he's seeing, less in snaps, we'll make a note of that, but start him while he's hot. I mean, at this point, how do you not, right? And they're playing Arizona this week. Matchup is outstanding. Quick tip of the hat, Tom, on St. Brown. It's like 4 straight 100-yard games. Wow. I mean, just wow. The yardage, that's insane. That's a great little run for him. He's a great player. Against zone, he's phenomenal. Love him. Brandon Kravitz, welcome in. Just finishing up a couple of quick players here. You can chime in with me, and then we'll get you going. Brandon will be giving you some waiver wire ideas in a few moments. You can follow him at Brandon Kravitz. He'll tell you more about his work. Brandon, last receiver I want to talk about is Garrett Wilson. I want to tell everybody, he is on pace for a 1,200-yard season. He's an amazing, amazing player. If he had a real quarterback, I could only imagine what his numbers would be. I thought preseason with Rodgers, I went out on a limb and I said he could be a 1,700-yard receiver. And with him getting on pace for 1,200, and this more than a half a season with Zach Wilson, I don't know that I was wrong. This guy is right there with the elite. He might not be Jamar Chase or Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson or A.J. Brown, but the next group, I think he's there. Any thoughts on Garrett Wilson, Brandon?
I love him as a player. This is why we got excited about him in the pre-draft process. He did have a real quarterback until we were 2 plays into that game to open the season, and Aaron Rodgers went down. But you see, he's got all of the ability. He can make circus catches. He's got speed. He can break away from cornerbacks. Great route runner. There's really nothing he can't do. So one of these days we will see it. The Jets will eventually have a quarterback that can support him in fantasy. But that's what's amazing. And we love this about DeAndre Hopkins early on in his career. He was making just chicken salad at a chicken scratch on a weekly basis. This does remind me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins early in his career before Hopkins got Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The player can do it without the quarterback, and they get the quarterback and then rocketing up very quickly. Admiral Nita asked a question about the trends for Adam Thielen. We knew the downturn had to come. That 4-game stretch he hadn't had one like that since 2018. And it was unsustainable for most players to average like over 100 yards and keep that consistently. His PPR value is okay, but in the last 2 weeks, he settled in more as a wide receiver 3. Any thoughts on Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I mean, if you were starting him and getting wins because you had Adam Thielen in your lineup and hand up there, I definitely benefited off of that. There's some guys that you just know that if that's all that they can offer, then great. I don't know what else to expect. Adam Thielen was never going to be able to sustain that. He's still getting a ton of targets, but this wasn't a guy that made the most of them in his latter days with the Minnesota Vikings. It just seems like he's a volume player. In PPR is still somebody that I'm willing to put in my starting lineup. But for a couple of weeks there, it was a no-brainer. He was an auto start. I think we are starting to get out of that territory. Like you said, wide receiver 3 range, still somebody you can feel comfortable putting in your lineup, but he should be in a lot of those start-sit questions should involve Adam Thielen on Sundays.
And the last one before we get to the waivers, so TJ Hockenson has been averaging an insane number of targets, double-digit targets in the last 4 weeks. Yardage has been great. And right now, from the last 4 weeks, he is the best fantasy tight end, way better than Travis Kelce. But here's a question, Brandon Kravitz. Justin Jefferson's coming back. How much of a hit do you think that puts on the insane target volume Hockenson's been seeing?
I think it's somewhat significant, but he's still one of the best tight ends in the NFL. We saw this last year. TJ Hockenson was, at the end of the season, he was a target monster, and it really helped buoy some of that production that we saw from him, especially when they got into the playoffs. And Justin Jefferson, teams just said, you're not going to beat us with Justin Jefferson in that Giants game specifically. And so Hockenson got all the targets. Maybe when we get later into the season and teams just, well, see, that's the tough thing, and I'm like hemming and hawing over this. You can't take away Jefferson anymore. Just solely focus on him. Jordan Addison has really opened things up for that offense. So this is not similar, even though my brain wanted to go there, Jim. This isn't the same as last year because Addison has really been a special wide receiver. Hockenson will still get his. I don't really know what do you do about that? He's your starting tight end if you got him, and you're not going to start anybody else over him.
Exactly. And I think the whole thing was that if Jefferson wasn't coming back, I would rank him ahead of Kelce every week right now. Because the volume and the production, I mean, you just think about it. That's higher volume than Kelce gets, right? And Kelce admitted himself, he's getting by on chemistry with his quarterback. He's lost a lot of athleticism at 34. He admits it openly. And you can see it. Yeah, the last 2 games, defense has said, you know what? All right, these other receivers could beat us, but you're not Kelce. And they were able to cash on it. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, we digress. Brandon Kravitz is here for some great waiver wire advice. And I did have a joke in there. Oh, my joke was this. Hey, the one thing that the Vikings have, they do have a rocket scientist running their offense. I love it, man. All right, Brandon, give us a few quarterback potential waiver ads for this week.
All right, well, let's talk about that astrophysicist turned NFL quarterback. Josh Dobbs has been a revelation this season. Another impressive stat line. I heard you talking about him before I jumped on. 3rd overall quarterback this week in fantasy, just sitting behind Lamar Jackson in rush yards at the quarterback position. I'm blown away by that, Jim. That is truly incredible with all the great running quarterbacks we have in the NFL. It's Lamar Jackson, Josh Dobbs. That's the list. So if he's available, you got to grab him. I don't even care what your quarterback situation is. Just go get him. And if you want streamable options, though, or maybe Josh Dobbs was already scooped up after he was electric in the week prior, Jordan Love against the Chargers, I think he's somebody that could pop off. They've been susceptible to the past. We saw that against the Detroit Lions. So he's a good streamer. And then Russell Wilson, it won't be pretty, but he could get you into the end zone a couple of times, taking on that Minnesota Vikings defense on Sunday Night Football. So we saw what he was able to do last night. There's not the same zip on his passes, but man, that corner pass before the end of the first half to Cortland Sutton, that was a thing of beauty. Not a lot of guys in the NFL could pull that one off on both sides. It was an amazing catch and a perfect throw that Russell Wilson placed it exactly where it needed to be.
And the rushing yardage is there. I mean, he's running not great numbers, but Russell Wilson's running it a bit too, and that chips in for fantasy. It offsets some of the low passing yardage numbers, but good call on those 3. See, Charlene made a little late entrance into the show. Good to see you. You're 8-2 in your league. Oh man, playoff bound.
Love that.
Yep. All right, Brand. Let's get to a couple running backs that we might be able to target here.
Yeah. On the real quick on the Russell Wilson front, have you noticed that the reason why his rushing totals seem to be staying afloat is because defenses don't care about him running anymore? So there's it's this weird sort of dichotomy of he doesn't run as well as he used to, so he's still able to pick up rushing yards because defenses aren't worried about it. It's kind of weird how that works.
There's no spy anymore.
Right.
Back in the day, that spy is now worried about somebody else.
Exactly. So let's talk about the running backs. I'm going to go Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. Clearly, we like some Vikings this week. Looks like he could be the answer for the Vikings' run game issues. He led the team in carries, 15 total carries in this game, got into the end zone. Still not a great yards per carry guy, but who else is in that backfield? Definitely going to take a stab at him. And something that doesn't show up on the box score, he had an explosive run that could have went for a touchdown. It was called back because of a penalty. So he could have had an even better stat line, and he was already fantasy viable. And Rico Dowdle is somebody. Can I interrupt
just for a second?
Go ahead, yeah.
So remember now, for this week, he could be a very big priority because during that game, Madison suffered a concussion and left, and Madison took over. Now, very few players are getting cleared in 1 week this year. And like Brandon said, Chandler could step up and really take a big part of the role if he has a big game, but there's a strong likelihood he is the guy with Kenny Nwangu just chipping in a couple touches. So great call on Chandler. You're giving us one more running back now.
Yeah, and Chandler has speed, which nobody else in that backfield seems to have. Rico Dowdle would be my second one. He's the clear-cut number 2 behind Tony Pollard. I'm thinking some Tony Pollard managers that are listening to this already have Rico Dowdle sitting behind him. If so, feather in your cap there. Pollard isn't playing the best ball right now, and it's not like I think he's going to get benched, but maybe we see more of a split, and Rico Dowdle could have some standalone value, especially in games where Dallas runs away from their opponent all the time. This happens regularly, and Dowdle's in there for the mop-up duty. I like the way he runs. 12 carries, 79 yards, and a touchdown, and at the very least, like I said, even if he doesn't provide you any fantasy substance in the next couple of weeks, we're talking about a tier 1 handcuff in fantasy football.
Brandon, I was talking in the preseason and then yesterday with Anthony Servino about the Tony Pollard. In the preseason, I said my one worry, and I didn't know if it would happen, was that when you're the change of pace guy, the defense plays at the speed of the starter. Last year it was Zeke Elliott. Defenses were playing that grinder set of defense in that speed. And when Pollard would come in, the defense, you don't just flip a switch. You're like muscle memory. You're playing at that speed, and we see it every year. We see these backup running backs come in and they just break off chunks of yardage. And I said, now when Pollard's going to be the guy, my question was, the defense is playing at his speed now, and is he going to lose those advantages? And small sample size says, yes, only 4 yards per carry. He was a 5.5 guy, only 6 yards per catch. He was like an 8 or a 9 yard guy. Now, maybe that changes, but yeah, so Rico Dowdle certainly could have an expanded role. Great waiver ad again, as usual. Good calls, Brandon. How about 4 receivers, maybe?
Yeah. You might want to write these down. Okay, I got to get this one out there. I mean, it's so obvious. I don't even need to explain this to you, but I will anyway. Noah Brown at this point, I mean, we just can't ignore this production. This guy has been so good. And he looks, I mean, the eye test, he's passing that too. 325 yards receiving in his last 2 games. I don't know how the Texans going to get away from this guy. I mean, they got a lot of mouths to feed if Nico Collins is healthy, but still, we just add pieces to productive offenses here. It's the whole point of the game that we're playing. I mean, he might have been snagged last week because he exploded in week 9, but if he's still out there, his roster percentage should be hovering around the 90s at this point. So that's kind of where we're at with Noah Brown. Jayden Reed is a name that I think I have brought up more than anybody else since we've been starting this segment in week 1. We are now at the point where this is no longer an opinion of mine. This is a fact. He's the best receiver on this team. He doesn't really see north of 60% of the snaps, but when he's on the field, Jordan Love always looks for him, and he's the most explosive player they have, and he's been productive. So I would go ahead and make sure he's on your roster. Jalen Guyton and Quentin Johnston of the Chargers, both viable flex options as Josh Palmer continues to sit on IR. And then this one's a little bit more sneaky. I think a lot of people are going to run out and try and go get Odell Beckham Jr. I think you're chasing a rabbit with that one. Odell is not that involved. So don't let the highlights fool you. Rashad Bateman, to me, is the sneaky ad here. Way more involved in the Ravens offense. And I think, with Zay Flowers, not all the targets are going to go his way. The second most involved in terms of just snap share in that offense, in terms of the wide receiver position, is Rashad Bateman. So I would look his way. Not somebody I'm comfortable starting yet, but I'd much rather stash him than stash Odell Beckham Jr.
If the Packers, and I was listening to the Pro Football Focus podcast this morning, they're going over the Sunday, and they posed a very good point. I love hearing it. If the Packers were rational right now, what would be their top 3 receiver rotation, and who? So between Dobbs, Reed, Watson, and Wicks, which one would be sitting?
Watson,
right? Hands down.
Terrible.
Hands down. But high draft pedigree, the speed, he's probably not going anywhere. But Wicks is seeing like 40% of the snaps. But anyway, again, Noah Brown, Jayden Reed, Rashad Bateman, Jalen Guyton. I had videos out last Friday telling people, pick him up, desperation flex. I had to use him and Trent Irwin in the Kings Classic.
Hey, you got by.
Thank you. The Tyler Conklin one is going to be him next. Tell us about Tyler Conklin at tight end.
Yeah, more than anything, there's just not a lot at the wire this week when it comes to the tight end position. So I don't want to gas him up too much here, but Not somebody I'm going to trip over myself to put in my starting lineup. Still catching passes from Zach Wilson. Garrett Wilson's really the only name in that offense that we truly trust, and I think you can even add Breece Hall to that point as well at this juncture. But this has become a theme. He throws the ball to Conklin at a pretty high rate. Conklin finished his tight end 5 in PPR this week. You're just not going to find any better on the waiver wire. If you need a tight end this week, I'm guessing Tyler Conklin's your best option.
You know, Brandon, from weeks 2 through about 5, he had really solid yards, like a few 40, 50-yard games. Then he had a little dry spell. Last 2 games, he's been right back there. So totally right about him. And all tight ends are going to have those lulls, but he probably has 5 very viable fantasy games this year. So great call on Tyler Conklin. What if somebody needs a defense special team help?
It's so hard to know who's available and who's not at this point in the season. There's so much drop and add when it comes to this position, but I'm thinking these are 2 that could be out there. The Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe there's the fantasy manager out there that's giving up on them after what happened against San Francisco. I wouldn't do that. Jacksonville is going to be pretty feisty after getting pummeled by San Francisco, and they get rookie Will Levis. So after throwing 4 touchdowns in his first appearance, has turned right back into a pumpkin. And the Commanders, they might get to play Tommy DeVito this week. So I think they would actually zoom to the top of the list. Hard not to love that, Jim.
Oh, my God, Tommy DeVito. Love it, love it,
love
it.
I felt bad for his parents sitting there in the stands watching this massacre.
Yeah, that's a rough one. Charlene's pointing out this is not waiver wire related. Most likely loves the Miami defense. The Miami defense could be a top 3 defense the rest of the season. They've been getting pass rush. They've been stopping the run. The longer we keep seeing Jalen Ramsey in that lineup, the more versatility they can use with their other players, because they run a lot of deep zone, but the other players can kind of neglect the area where Guyton's at. This defense, and with Fangio's defense, is a learning curve. This could be a wicked defense by the end of the season. Any comments there, Brandon?
Yeah, they also had a bit of a gauntlet that they ran through, and I think their schedule eases up a bit. And when you run into the Chiefs and the Eagles, and that this isn't exactly a startable defense in those situations going up against 2 MVP candidate quarterbacks, but things should get a little bit easier for them, and they're getting healthier. Man, as long as they're playing at home, it's hard not to love them on both sides of the ball.
Brandon, tell everybody where they can find you and your work.
At Brandon Kravitz, you can find me across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. I got you covered. Also, 5 days a week on the Fantasy Bites podcast, all part of the RotoWire infrastructure here. I give you 5 minutes on everything you need to know. If there's an NFL game that day, slew of NBA, we've got in-season tournament games, so I give you injury updates and all of that. Yes. And if you're ever in the Orlando area, 3 to 6 p.m., you can catch me on our iHeartRadio affiliate, 96.9 The Game, and chatting all things sports. So always feel free to hit me up at Brandon Kravitz. Love to chat with all of the great listeners and viewers for RotoWire.
Hey, with the 5-minute Fantasy Bites, Brandon Kravitz proves that less is more.
That's my whole brand.
Right? And it's the best. Less is always more.
I want to get you in and out every week.
That's the way to do it. Charlene told us to have a good weekend and a good day, Brandon. So thank you, Charlene. Everybody in the chat, thanks for hanging with us. For Brandon Kravitz, I'm Jim Coventry. Have a great day, everyone.